Welcome to our second webinar for parents. Today we're gonna talk about, we're gonna provide you with some tips to help your child support your child with their second language acquisition at home, and especially French, because we're a French school. So we'll give you some tips and resources for supporting your child's French. But if you have a child who speaks another language, this could also apply. We have two in-house experts who are going to guide you through this webinar this morning. Lower School Head Sebastien Roberts and Curriculum Coordinator Maggie Schoon. We're together for 30 minutes, and we have enabled the chat function, so you can ask your question either through the chat throughout the webinar, and we'll take your question at the end of the webinar. You can also wait till the end and ask your question using voice. We can just unmute yourself and ask your questions then. So without further ado, Sebastien and Maggie, you can take it away.
Thank you, Cécile. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to this second webinar. I'm really thrilled to participate and to give you some tips around the second language acquisition and how you can maintain your child's language as we are heading towards the summer and the long break. How can you really sustain these communication skills, the language written, oral, and reading skills? So we will share with you some tips that we think are the ones that you should maybe encourage your child in using. Of course, there are many other tips. There is not one, recipe, one magic recipe. We are all in this, together. So if you have also ideas, just feel free to share them in the chat box. It's really also helpful for the community. So I'm really happy that Maggie Schoon, our curriculum coordinator, but also instructional coach, is joining us. She's also bringing an extensive experience in the bilingualism and how our children are learning a second language, as she's also bilingual herself and her family also. So let's dive in our presentation. So it will be a 10-minute presentation, and then we'll do a Q&A. So we have already received a few questions, but feel free to add some question in the chat or at the end of this webinar. So to start, we wanted to maybe give some principles regarding a second language acquisition. When a child, and these principles are, for anybody, but when a child is learning a second language, there are a few things, mainly three key elements that a child is experiencing when he's learning a new language. First one is the comprehensible input, meaning that when you, for example, your child just first come at the preschool level at EB, for example, and if a child does not speak French at all, being exposed to the language through the hearing, the reading stories, is something that it's the first exposure for a child. This input will be auditory, so he will learn the first sounds, the first words, and really try to understand the meaning of it. Relating to the gesture, to a picture on a reading page, and all these connections are going to be made possible because the comprehensive input is really the first step when you learn a language. So that's the reason why when we try to stick to maintaining a language, being exposed to hearing and reading is also a lot. It's also important for a child. Then you have a comprehensible output, meaning that when a child is comfortable hearing, even some kind of understanding what someone is reading, then the second aspect of it is really starting to speak and then to write. So speaking, producing an oral message is something that starts early as maybe 2 to 3 months after someone is really in another language setting. And when you have this speaking aspect, the connection between what the child has heard or been read is making into the speech. So there will be syntactic error, there will be vocabulary error, but just the fact that trying to speak is a good way to really provide the child with this new experience. So writing, of course, comes after speaking. So basically, you have the 4 communication skills over there. And the third element is really the review or feedback, which is really when you have an advanced level in a second language, that you are able to identify errors and to make change in all the responses, and you adapt your message. This third element is really a key features when you have experts, speakers, and in that regards, it really comes at the end when you have this reflection and this reflective mindset. Therefore, learning a new language involves listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Writing is one of the last step. Sometimes even when you write, in a new alphabet and it's a new writing format, it can really be hard. But we just want to stress that if we focus, or if someone focuses exclusively on just one activity, the others fall behind. That's the reason why when we learn a second language, we have these 4 communication skills that are really interdependent and that need to be taught together. So let's go and review, and we're going to give you some tips on the 4 skills of communication. The oral comprehension, which is the listening, when you listen to a story, when you listen to someone speaking. The oral production, when you speak. The written comprehension, when you read, and the written production, when you write. So, for example, these are a few tips that we can really share with you regarding the oral skills, the listening. So listening is an important skill. And you have out there, especially on the French accredited website, which means that they are really accredited by the French Minister of Education. We have the video Les Fondamentaux, which are short videos around 2 to 5 minutes regarding every topic, which has grammar, but it can be history, geography. It's also kids friendly, it's cartoons usually, and it's really great for a child because it's short, it's not going too fast, the vocabulary used is very simple, it's targeted to, let's say, 5 years old to 10 years old. So it's really nice. Then you have videos, C'est pas sorcier. Most of them are on YouTube. And it's really also a great program because this program dives into more scientific or, vocabulary really related on a topic. And of course, if you are looking at C'est pas sorcier on the history or geography, the vocabulary won't be the same, and it gives a lot of insight in all the different fields of vocabulary. Recently, the French Ministry of Education has released a new website which is called Lumni. Mainly there are videos on the grammar, on the conjugation by grade level. So you click on your grade level and you have a free access to all these grade videos. And it's a nice way also to learn a language and to be also in contact with different subject matters. L'École des Loisirs, which is a major publisher for children in France, is releasing a lot of their books, and they have recorded it. So basically, all the audiobooks are on their website. There are free access, but there are also subscriptions. And all these books are really great, and it's targeted to age 2 to 3 to, let's say, 7 and 8. Then we have the podcast. There are a bunch of podcasts in French, and so this presentation will be posted on the EB website. But basically, we have already made a list of really amazing podcasts, and they are already on the website. So check this out, because you have podcasts in English, in French. And it's also a podcast. It's also a good way for students to listen without any visual support, visual material. It's really enabling the child to focus on the sounds and on the meaning of the words. Then, of course, you can have cartoons in French. There's a lot of nice cartoons. TV 5 Monde, which is a channel, French TV channel in French. And, there's a lot of different topics. And finally, there's a site called Whisperies, where you can find a lot of audiobooks in French. I think, and we'll go over that at the end, one of the many question is, how can I encourage my child to read more French books? Reading a French book can be really challenging because of the structure, the syntax, the conjugation, the vocabulary. And so, for example, if your child is confident in reading, let's say, Harry Potter in English, it will be really hard to transfer that in French, like meaning, okay, I give you Harry Potter in French, just read it in French. It's not possible, because the reading must be really at his grade, at his level, and it will be only, I think, counterproductive, because the child won't really experience the nice, the gritty, the nice things that a book is giving you. And so it's not, I don't think we should really go into, okay, let's transfer this book because you like it in English, let's read it in French. It's more regarding the level of the child, of the level of reading. And then you have the oral production, and I will let Maggie just go over a few slides now. Maggie?
Okay, thank you, Sebastien. So one of the ideas that you can use to have your child be speaking more in French or the target language at home is to set up a little challenge for them. So say today we're going to speak in French during the lunch for, 1/2 hour, and, we'll speak in English other times of the day, and give the child positive reinforcement for meeting the goals. So if you kind of set a family goal for how much you want to be using the target language, it can help when everyone's at home right now. So this week at EB, we have a défi français that has a pirate theme, where we're asking the children to set a goal each day and to speak in French during parts of their day when they're at home and not in their live classes. And it's just to motivate them to use the language more, because obviously most children are going to revert back to whatever their stronger language is. And if we're trying to acquire a second language, we really need to make a little bit more of an effort. So having a little challenge can be a fun way to have your child speak more in the target language at home. Who can they speak with? Obviously, if one of the parents at home speaks French, even if it's not fluently, that can be an option. Siblings can be an option, which is a great option for most of the children at EB that have their sibling at the school. But it could also be a relative or a friend by phone or video conference. Could be a pet, their dolls, their toys, their stuffed animals. So if your child is an only child and neither of the parents speak French at home, for example, you'll have to be a little bit more creative of how to get them to speak in French. Another idea is to film a video of a skit or playtime in French. So a lot of times kids are really motivated by being videotaped because they know it's something that will stay, that they could watch again later, that the other people can watch. So you might encourage the kids to set up a little skit, again, either with their animals or their toys or with their sibling, and kind of play out a little scene in French that you video. And or you could just do playtime in French. My kids the other day put together a Lego set, a gymnastics Lego set on the Monday. And then I said, okay, I'm going to film you guys doing your little show. And they had the whole gymnastics show from start to finish of all the things that happened with the Legos, but they did it all in French. And because we were videoing it, they knew they had to stay in that target language. Of course, playing games in French is a good idea. They can be board games, or they can just be imaginative play. Okay, let's go on a trip, and let's pretend, with our toys that we're in France, and how are we going to order our food, or go about our time in French. And then also songs and poems are a really great way to encourage oral production at home, because songs and poems have the rhythm and music behind them that helps with production. And the students that are at EB have a wide collection of songs and poems in their cahier de chansons et poésie, which is nice for them to go back over them and go back over songs and poems they learned earlier in the year. They've memorized those, they know them by heart, and so it's a good way for them to practice oral production. So remember that speaking a language is a little bit harder than listening to it. So the things that Sebastien showed on the slide previous could be for any level of a language acquisition, that there can be some comprehensible input there, but for the output, it's a little bit more challenging. And if you don't speak French at home, you're going to have the issue of not really knowing how to correct them if they're saying everything correctly. But the most important thing is to keep speaking, to keep producing, because the less you do, the more rusty it gets. And by keeping things fun and light, it can help to encourage them to speak.
Go ahead, Maggie.
Cecile has put a question in the group chat. So if you have tips or activities that you've done at home with your child on any of these topics, the listening, the speaking, the reading, and the writing, please put those in the chat right now so we can learn from each other, as Sebastien mentioned. So speaking about reading, Sebastien made a very good point earlier. Sometimes the child's reading level is not as advanced in their second language as it is in their first language. They're going to have a little bit of a vocabulary barrier, and so we want to keep the books that they're reading easy enough that they can enjoy them and understand them, because some students resist reading in their second language when it's basically just too hard. And the research shows us that when we read things that are too hard, unless we're super motivated in the topic, and then sometimes it can work, on occasion, but on a regular basis, if we read things that are constantly too hard for us, we tend to shy away from them. So one of the things that you do want to do is allow student choice. So, as Sebastien mentioned, the series that they might like in their stronger language, if that's English, may not be a series they can read in French, but they could always go back to something they enjoyed before. So for instance, maybe they can't read Harry Potter in French yet, but they could read Geronimo Stilton. And maybe they read Geronimo Stilton, a year or two ago, but they're not quite out of it, that, they're still interested in that topic. And because they're familiar with the series, they could connect to it more. So series or characters that they're familiar with can be a good option, but definitely allow student choice. It's always a great idea for motivation and engagement for kids to be able to choose what they read. Raz Kids is an excellent website that has leveled books in French. So it's a great way to keep the level at the right level. So, and also they're shorter books. So that can be a great motivator too. Sometimes it's hard to take on, this huge chapter book in French when you can read easier in English, but Raz has shorter books in both fiction and nonfiction. So that can be motivating and engaging for students. Our students at EB also have access to Epic, which has some books in French, including audiobooks. Keeping a reading log to track progress and giving positive reinforcement is always a good idea. If you want to encourage something, track it and give your kids some positive reinforcement for the reading that they're doing in French. And then, of course, reading songs and poems is a great idea also. So in talking about writing, is that me still?
Yes.
Okay, so one thing is to write in a journal every day in French and include a little picture. It can be anything. It can just be what they had to eat that day, what they played, what they did, who they spoke with. Start with just one sentence a day if that's enough, and then you could work up to 3, 4, 5 sentences a day. Writing a letter to a teacher or a friend that you actually mail. When writing is for an authentic purpose, it motivates and engages students more than if they're just writing and no one's going to read it and there's no outcome for it. Making lists is a great way to encourage your child to write. So making the grocery list and figuring out how to say each of the things that you want to buy at the grocery store or on Amazon Prime in French is a great idea. Creating a story, so be imaginative and write a story together that's a made-up fiction story. Writing about reading, so if they are doing some reading, like some of those short texts on RAS, they could write a sentence or two about what they read and what they learned. Making a comic book can be really fun, and that's also a good one for reading that I forgot to mention. Les bandes dessinées, or the comic books in French, can be a great way to get kids motivated to read, but also writing when they make their own comic book and then they could record it with audio would be a really nice, again, fun and engaging way for them to be writing in the target language.
And we would like to share with you 2 helpful books. One from François Grosjean, who is someone who have studied a lot and made a lot of research regarding bilingualism, and his book Bilingual is a really great book if you want to really learn how second language acquisition works and what is to be bilingual. And this other one is a Parents and Teacher Guide to Bilingualism from Colin Baker, which is great because it gives a lot of tips, a lot of questions regarding for homework, for example, or when is bilingualism really something that we want to dive in, and so what are the main takeaways of being bilingual in this new world. It's a great book. We have worked a lot with the faculty on this one, and he really shares great researches and tips for everybody, so for parents and teachers. And so we could not encourage enough to read these books over the summer.